The worst mistakes in my life never arrived looking dangerous. They arrived smiling. The rain tapped softly against the windows of the little Italian restaurant as I checked my reflection in the dark screen of my phone for the third time in 10 minutes. 25 years old, 1 year away from finishing nursing school, and somehow I still got nervous before dates. Maybe because this was my first one in almost a year. Maybe because my best friend had spent 2 straight weeks convincing me that Ryan Keller was exactly the kind of guy I needed. Stable, successful, charming, the kind of man who remembered birthdays and opened doors. At least that was what she'd said. Looking back now, I should have listened to the tiny voice in my head the moment I walked through the restaurant doors and saw him staring at his watch instead of looking for me. "You're late," he said before I even sat down. I glanced at the clock above the bar. 7:02, 2 minutes. I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Traffic was awful, I explained as I slid into the booth. Manhattan traffic is always awful. That's why people leave early. The smile he gave me never reached his eyes. Something cold settled in my stomach. Not fear, just discomfort. The kind you ignore because you don't want to seem judgmental. The waiter arrived. Ryan ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. Strike number 2. Then he spent 15 minutes talking about himself, his investments, his apartment, his gym membership, his expensive watch. Every story somehow ended with how impressive he was. Every question I answered became another opportunity for him to talk about himself. By the time our food arrived, I felt more like an audience than a date. Outside, rain streaked down the glass. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with laughter and conversation. Everyone seemed happy except me. I checked my phone under the table. A text from my friend Ashley appeared. "How's Prince Charming?" I stared at the screen for a second before typing back. "More Prince than charming." She immediately responded with 3 laughing emojis. I almost laughed too. Almost. Then Ryan reached across the table and lowered my phone. It's rude to text during a date. His tone wasn't playful. It sounded like a warning. Heat rushed into my cheeks. The words slipped out automatically. Ryan leaned back and nodded as if correcting me had been completely reasonable. That's when I noticed something strange. Every time I disagreed with him, even about something small, his jaw tightened. Every time I mentioned a future plan that didn't include him, he redirected the conversation. It wasn't obvious, not enough to justify standing up and leaving, just enough to make me increasingly uncomfortable. The check arrived around 9:30. Relief flooded through me, finally. Ryan paid without complaint and stood. "Let's go somewhere quieter." The way he said it made my stomach twist again. Actually, I should head home. I have clinical rotations at 7 tomorrow morning. His smile disappeared for half a second, just half a second. Then it returned. "Come on, one more drink. I really can't." The rain had intensified outside, hammering against the sidewalk. For the first time all evening, silence settled between us. Ryan stared at me. Not speaking, not smiling, just staring. Something about that look sent a chill down my spine. Then he finally nodded. "Fine." The words sounded polite. His eyes didn't. We stepped outside into the cold night air. The city lights reflected across the wet pavement. Cars hissed through puddles. People hurried beneath umbrellas. Normal, safe, ordinary. Yet the uneasy feeling in my chest only grew stronger. Ryan walked beside me toward the parking garage across the street. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself I was being unfair. I told myself this was simply a bad date and nothing more. I was wrong, because the nightmare hadn't started yet. The parking garage smelled like rain, concrete, and motor oil. Every sound seemed louder inside the cavernous structure. Footsteps echoed. Car doors slammed somewhere in the distance. Tires hissed across wet pavement outside. I tightened my grip on my purse and followed Ryan toward the 3rd level where he had parked. The uneasy feeling from dinner had not gone away. If anything, it had grown stronger. "You are quiet," Ryan said as we crossed between rows of vehicles. "Long day," I replied. "Or maybe you are judging me." I forced a small laugh. "I barely know you." "Exactly," he smiled, but there was something sharp beneath it. People always judge before they know the full story. I did not answer. My white sneakers splashed through a shallow puddle left by the storm. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, casting long shadows between the parked cars. I checked my phone. 9:48. If I left now, I could still get 5 hours of sleep for my clinical rotation. Ryan noticed. "You check your phone a lot. I have an early morning. You mentioned that." His voice sounded flatter than before. We reached a dark gray SUV near the far corner of the level. He stopped beside the passenger door. "One drink," he said. "There is a rooftop lounge a few blocks away." I shook my head. "I really need to go home." Silence. Rain drummed against the upper levels of the garage. Somewhere nearby, an engine started. Ryan stared at me. The smile was gone again. You know, he said slowly, most women would be grateful for this kind of attention. My stomach tightened. I appreciated dinner. That is not what I said. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I took a small step back. Ryan, I think this is where we say goodnight. His eyes narrowed, not dramatically, just enough to make my pulse quicken. You are overreacting. Maybe, I forced another polite smile, but I still need to leave. He exhaled sharply through his nose. Then, as if flipping a switch, he smiled again. Fine, relief washed through me. Maybe I had misread everything. Maybe this was simply an awkward date between two people who were not compatible. I started reaching for my phone to order a rideshare. Then Ryan glanced at the screen. You are not calling a ride. Why not? Because I can drive you. That is okay. Emily. Hearing my name in that tone made my chest tighten. I said I can drive you. The friendliness had vanished completely now. Around us, the garage suddenly felt much emptier than before. I looked toward the elevator bank, nearly 100 feet away. A young couple stepped inside and disappeared behind closing doors. The level fell quiet again. Echoes, fluorescent lights. Ryan took a step closer. I paid for dinner. I blinked. What does that have to do with anything? It means I am trying to be nice. I thanked you. Then stop acting like I am some kind of problem. My heartbeat accelerated. Every instinct told me to leave, immediately. Ryan, I am going home. I turned and started walking toward the elevators. Behind me, his footsteps followed, not rushing, not threatening, just following. That somehow felt worse. Emily, I kept walking. Emily. The second time, his voice sounded harder. My phone trembled slightly in my hand as I opened the rideshare app. No drivers nearby. 5 minutes away. Maybe 6, too long. I could hear Ryan gaining ground behind me. Then another sound cut through the garage. The deep rumble of an engine. Powerful, expensive. Approaching from the entrance ramp below. Headlights swept across the concrete pillars like white searchlights. I glanced toward the sound without thinking. A black SUV emerged from the shadows and began climbing toward our level. For reasons I could not explain, every nerve in my body suddenly went on alert. The black SUV moved slowly up the ramp, its headlights cutting across the concrete walls in bright white arcs. I should not have paid attention to it. I should have kept walking toward the elevators and focused on getting home. But something about the vehicle made the entire garage feel different. Even Ryan noticed. His footsteps slowed behind me. The SUV reached our level and rolled forward with deliberate confidence, the engine humming so quietly it barely sounded real. This was not the kind of vehicle driven by ordinary people. The glossy black paint reflected the fluorescent lights overhead. The windows were tinted dark enough that I could not see inside. My pulse continued to race as I checked the rideshare app again. 6 minutes. It still said 6 minutes. Somehow that felt impossible. Time seemed frozen. The SUV passed 2 rows away from us and continued deeper into the garage. Ryan stopped talking. That alone felt strange. Up until now, he had always needed to control the conversation, needed the attention, needed the last word. Now he simply watched the vehicle. I glanced back at him. His jaw had tightened again. His eyes followed the SUV until it disappeared behind a concrete pillar. Do you know them? I asked before I could stop myself. Ryan immediately looked away. No. The answer came too quickly. Then why are you staring? I am not staring. He forced a laugh that sounded hollow. You are getting paranoid, Emily. Maybe he was right. Maybe the entire evening had put me on edge. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. But the uneasy feeling refused to leave. Rain hammered the upper levels of the garage. Somewhere above us, thunder rolled across the city. I wrapped my arms around myself against the cold. I am leaving, I said. Good night, Ryan. This time I started walking without waiting for a response. 10 steps, 15, 20. Then I heard the SUV again. The deep engine note echoed through the concrete structure as it turned the corner and entered the lane directly ahead of me. The vehicle came to a smooth stop near the elevator entrance, not blocking it, not rushing, just waiting. I slowed instinctively. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. At first all I noticed was the height, then the suit, dark charcoal, tailored perfectly. Rain had not touched him, yet somehow he carried the storm with him. He looked to be in his early 30s. Broad shoulders. Dark hair brushed back neatly. Every movement calm, controlled, confident. The kind of confidence that did not need to announce itself. He closed the door and adjusted the cuff of his jacket. Nothing dramatic, nothing threatening. Yet every nerve in my body suddenly became aware of him. Not because he looked dangerous, because everyone else seemed to react to him, including Ryan. I glanced behind me and nearly stopped walking altogether. Ryan had gone pale. Not terrified, not panicked, just suddenly very aware of his surroundings. Like a man who had unexpectedly found himself in front of someone important. The stranger's gaze moved across the garage, briefly, methodically. His eyes landed on me for less than a second before shifting toward Ryan. I could not explain why that tiny moment made my heartbeat skip. He did not smile, he did not frown, he simply observed. Then another black SUV appeared behind the first, and another. The second vehicle parked nearby. Two men stepped out wearing dark suits. They immediately positioned themselves several feet away from the first man. Not beside him, behind him, respectfully. The realization hit me all at once. Whoever this stranger was, he was not alone, and he was definitely not ordinary. Ryan swallowed visibly. The sound carried through the silence between us. Then, for the first time all evening, he looked uncertain. Very uncertain. And somehow that frightened me even more than his confidence ever had. For several seconds, nobody moved. The rain continued to drum against the concrete above us, filling the silence with a steady rhythm that somehow made everything feel more surreal. I looked from Ryan to the stranger near the elevator and back again. The difference between them was impossible to ignore. Ryan suddenly seemed smaller somehow, less certain, less in control. The stranger had not spoken a single word, yet the entire atmosphere of the garage revolved around him. One of the men who had arrived in the second SUV stepped forward and quietly said something I could not hear. The stranger gave a slight nod, nothing more, no raised voice, no dramatic gesture, just a nod. Yet everyone around him reacted immediately. My nursing instructors used to talk about command presence, the ability to calm a chaotic room simply by walking into it. This felt like that, except stronger, much stronger. I tightened my grip on my phone. 5 minutes until my ride. Then 4. The number on the screen felt meaningless. Time had become strange. Ryan cleared his throat. Come on, Emily. Let me walk you to the elevator. His sudden politeness made my stomach twist. 20 minutes ago, he had been trying to tell me what I should do. Now he sounded eager to leave. I can manage, I said quietly. He forced a smile. Do not be stubborn. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. An older couple stepped out carrying shopping bags. The brief appearance of normal people made me feel slightly better. The world had not stopped. This was still New York. Still a parking garage. Still an ordinary night. At least that was what I kept telling myself. The older couple passed by the stranger near the elevator. Instantly, both smiled and greeted him. To my surprise, he nodded politely in return, respectful, calm. The interaction lasted only a few seconds, but it changed something in my mind. Dangerous people were not supposed to look that composed, that civilized. The stranger glanced at his watch. Silver, expensive. Then his eyes swept the garage again. This time they paused on me slightly longer. Not enough to feel rude, just observant, like he was assessing a situation rather than staring at a person. I looked away first. Heat crept into my cheeks for reasons I could not explain. Ryan noticed. His expression tightened. Do you know him? He asked. No. Have you met him before? No. My answer came immediately because it was true. I had never seen the man in my life, yet something about him felt oddly familiar. Not his face. Not his voice, because I had not heard it. Just the feeling. The certainty that everyone around him knew exactly who he was. Ryan checked his own phone and muttered something under his breath. His confidence seemed to drain away minute by minute. Then another vehicle entered the garage. A luxury sedan this time. The driver parked several spaces away, stepped out, noticed the stranger, and immediately straightened his posture. He even offered a respectful greeting before continuing toward the elevators. The stranger acknowledged him with another small nod. That was when I finally realized what was bothering me. People were not afraid of him. They respected him deeply. The distinction mattered. My rideshare app refreshed. Driver arriving in 2 minutes, relief flooded through me. Finally, I would go home, sleep for a few hours, wake up and laugh about this bizarre evening. Ryan suddenly stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to lower his voice. When your car gets here, I think you should leave immediately. I blinked. That was already the plan. Good. His eyes flicked toward the stranger. Trust me. The words caught me off guard. All evening Ryan had wanted control. Now he sounded like someone who had lost it. Then the stranger's phone rang. He answered calmly. Spoke only a few quiet words. Listened. And whatever he heard caused the faintest change in his expression. Not anger, not concern. Focus, complete focus. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned slightly toward the entrance of the garage. At that exact moment, a cold sensation ran down my spine. Because for the first time all night, I had the unmistakable feeling that something important was about to happen. The feeling refused to leave. It sat in my chest like a warning I could not explain. The elevator chimed again somewhere behind me, but I barely noticed. My attention remained fixed on the stranger near the black SUV. He stood perfectly still, one hand resting casually in his pocket, his gaze directed toward the garage entrance. Around him, the men who had arrived with him seemed alert without appearing nervous. Professional. disciplined, like they already knew something the rest of us did not. I checked my phone again. 1 minute. My rideshare driver was finally approaching. Relief flickered through me. Almost home, almost out of this strange night. Ryan shifted beside me. He had become unusually quiet. The change was unsettling. Earlier, he had dominated every conversation. Now he seemed distracted by the stranger's presence. His eyes kept drifting in that direction. Then a black luxury sedan rolled into the garage and parked near the entrance. 2 men stepped out. Expensive suits, expensive watches. They immediately approached the stranger. One extended his hand. The stranger accepted it with a calm nod. Even from a distance, I could tell who held the power in that conversation. The newcomers carried themselves like successful businessmen, yet they treated him with unmistakable respect. My curiosity grew stronger. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. Ryan did not answer immediately. His jaw tightened. "You do not want to know." I looked at him. "That is not really an answer." He exhaled slowly. "Trust me." The irony almost made me laugh. Trust had become the one thing missing from this entire evening. A notification appeared on my phone. "Your driver has arrived." I immediately looked toward the pickup area near the elevator entrance. A silver sedan had just entered the garage. Finally, I started walking toward it. Ryan followed. "Emily," I kept moving. "What? Listen to me for a second." Something in his voice made me stop. Not because I trusted him, because he suddenly sounded anxious, truly anxious. I turned halfway toward him. Rain echoed through the structure above us. The silver sedan waited near the curb lane. Freedom sat less than 50 feet away. "What?" I repeated. Ryan hesitated. His eyes moved briefly toward the stranger, then back to me. "Maybe tonight did not go the way I planned." I blinked. That might be the understatement of the year. For the first time all evening, embarrassment flashed across his face. Genuine embarrassment. I came on too strong. "Yes, I am sorry." The apology surprised me, not because it fixed anything, because it seemed sincere. Before I could respond, movement near the entrance caught my attention. One of the stranger's associates approached him and quietly handed over a folder. The stranger opened it, glanced at a few pages, then looked up directly at me. My breath caught. There were dozens of people moving through the garage now. Drivers, shoppers, couples. Yet somehow I knew he was looking at me specifically. The moment lasted only a second. Then he handed the folder back and said something to the man beside him. The associate immediately nodded. A strange sensation crawled across my skin. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Like being noticed by someone important without understanding why. Ryan saw it too. I knew because his expression darkened instantly. "Do you know him?" he asked again. "No." "Then why does he keep looking over here?" "I have no idea." The answer was truthful. I had never seen the man before tonight. Yet every instinct told me this chance encounter was not as random as it appeared. The silver rideshare sedan flashed its headlights, waiting. I took a step toward it, then another. Behind me, Ryan remained silent. Near the elevators, the stranger finally moved. He buttoned his suit jacket with calm precision and started walking in my direction. Suddenly, for reasons I could not explain, my heartbeat doubled. Every instinct told me to keep walking toward the waiting rideshare. Instead, I froze. The stranger moved through the garage with the kind of calm confidence that made everyone else unconsciously step aside. He was not rushing. He was not trying to attract attention. Yet attention followed him anyway. The polished concrete reflected the overhead lights across his dark shoes as he approached. Behind him, 2 of his associates remained several yards back, giving him space. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me. I noticed the movement immediately. Earlier that night, he had wanted control of every conversation, every decision, every moment. Now he looked like a man hoping not to be noticed. The contrast was impossible to miss. My rideshare driver flashed the headlights again. Waiting. I should have left. I should have gotten into the car and forgotten this entire night ever happened. But curiosity rooted me in place. The stranger stopped a few feet away. Up close, he looked even more composed. Early 30s, dark hair, sharp features, gray eyes that seemed to absorb details without effort. Expensive suit, expensive watch. Everything about him suggested power, but none of it felt flashy. His gaze settled briefly on me before shifting to Ryan. The silence stretched. Rain echoed above us. Somewhere in the distance, an elevator chimed. Ryan forced a smile. It looked painful. "Good evening," he said. The stranger studied him for a moment. Ryan Keller. His voice was deep and controlled, not loud, not intimidating. Yet hearing Ryan's full name spoken so casually made my stomach tighten. Ryan blinked. "Have we met?" The stranger ignored the question. His attention remained fixed on him. "Interesting place for you to be tonight." Ryan swallowed. "I heard it. Actually heard it." The sound seemed absurdly loud in the silence. "I was just leaving." "I imagine you were." The stranger's tone never changed. Not once. I looked between them, completely lost. "Do you two know each other?" I asked. For the first time, the stranger looked directly at me. Something softened in his expression. Not much, just enough to make me wonder if I imagined it. "No," he said, "but I know of him." Ryan immediately looked away. That reaction told me more than words could have. My phone buzzed again. Driver waiting. The notification flashed across the screen. The stranger noticed it. Of course he noticed it. He seemed to notice everything. "Your ride is here," he said calmly. "You should not keep the driver waiting." The statement was simple, reasonable. Yet somehow it felt different coming from him. Like advice instead of instruction. I nodded.
Right.
For some reason, my voice sounded smaller than usual. I took a step toward the waiting sedan. Ryan suddenly spoke. "Emily, wait." I stopped. Not because I wanted to, because tension immediately filled the air. The stranger turned slightly toward him. Ryan hesitated. Whatever he had planned to say seemed to vanish. His confidence disappeared completely. "Never mind," he muttered. The stranger watched him for another second before speaking. "Good decision." The words were polite, perfectly polite. Yet Ryan looked as though he had just been warned about something important. I could not understand any of it. The stranger stepped aside, clearing the path to the rideshare. "Have a safe drive home, Miss Carter." My entire body went still. The words hit me far harder than they should have. My breath caught. A cold sensation ran down my spine. "What did you just call me?" I asked. The stranger's expression did not change. "Miss Carter." My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it. "How do you know my name?" This time there was no curiosity in my voice, only alarm, genuine alarm. Every warning I had ever ignored suddenly came rushing back at once. I took an involuntary step backward. "Who are you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Neither man answered immediately. Ryan looked almost as shocked as I felt. The stranger remained calm. Too calm. That somehow made it worse. "You have been following me?" I asked. "No." "Then how do you know who I am?" My grip tightened around my phone. For one irrational second I considered calling someone. Anyone. The stranger seemed to understand exactly what I was thinking. "You are right to be cautious," he said quietly. "And you should be." The honesty caught me off guard. "Then answer the question." For the first time all evening, the faintest hint of a smile touched his face. Not amusement, not mockery, something else. New York is a surprisingly small city. It was not really an answer. It raised far more questions than it solved. Yet something about the way he said it kept me from walking away. I hated that. Absolutely hated it. Because standing there in the middle of that parking garage, with rain echoing above us and my rideshare waiting nearby, I realized one terrifying thing. I was no longer thinking about Ryan Keller. I was thinking about the stranger who somehow knew my name. For the rest of my lunch break, I could not stop staring at the photograph. Luca Moretti looked exactly the same as he had in the parking garage. Calm, controlled, impossible to ignore. Yet seeing him on a screen somehow made him feel even more intimidating. The article described him as a businessman, investor, and philanthropist. There were photographs of ribbon-cutting ceremonies, hospital donations, and charity galas. Every image showed the same composed expression. Every headline suggested influence that stretched far beyond ordinary wealth. "You have definitely heard of him before," Ashley said. "Everyone in New York has." I shook my head. "Apparently not everyone." She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "People say he knows everything that happens in this city before anyone else does." I laughed nervously. "That sounds ridiculous. Maybe. But I have never met anyone who was not careful around him." The conversation stayed with me for the rest of the shift. Every time I checked a patient's chart, I found myself thinking about the parking garage. Every time my phone buzzed, part of me expected to see an unfamiliar number. By the time my shift ended after 7 that evening, exhaustion had settled into my bones. The rain had finally stopped. The sky above Queens glowed deep orange and purple as the sun disappeared behind the skyline. I stepped out of the hospital carrying a coffee and trying very hard not to think about Luca Moretti. Naturally, that lasted less than 5 minutes. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stopped walking. My heart immediately sped up. It was probably spam. A wrong number. Nothing important. Yet I opened the message anyway. The text contained only one sentence. "I hope your shift went smoothly today." I stared at the screen, then read it again and again. No signature, no explanation. Just one sentence. A chill ran through me. Rational explanations flooded my mind. Maybe Ashley was playing a joke. Maybe someone from the hospital had my number. Maybe there was a perfectly normal reason. Then a second message arrived. "You should not walk home alone tonight." My pulse jumped. I looked around instinctively. People filled the sidewalk, nurses leaving work, families entering the emergency department, cars moving through the evening traffic. Everything looked normal. Yet suddenly I felt watched, not threatened, observed. The distinction mattered. My fingers immediately moved across the screen. Who is this? The reply arrived less than 10 seconds later. Luca Moretti. I stopped breathing for a second. Then another message appeared before I could respond. I apologize for the surprise. The surprise? I whispered to myself. My heart was pounding now. I typed back before I could overthink it. How did you get my number? This time the response took longer. Nearly a full minute. Long enough for me to consider deleting the conversation entirely. Finally, the screen lit up. Through a professional contact connected to the hospital foundation. The answer should have reassured me. Somehow it did not. I stared at the message. Technically possible, technically reasonable, yet still unsettling. Before I could decide how to respond, another text appeared. I understand why that concerns you. At least he was self-aware. That counted for something, maybe. Then a black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb across the street. The rear passenger window lowered a few inches. My breath caught immediately. Gray eyes met mine from inside the vehicle. Luca Moretti, even seated, he somehow carried the same commanding presence. For a moment neither of us moved. Then he offered a slight nod, not demanding, not possessive, simply acknowledging my existence. The window rose again. The sedan remained parked. I should have walked away. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I crossed the street. Each step made my heartbeat louder. By the time I reached the vehicle, one of the rear doors had already opened. "Miss Carter," a polite voice said from the front seat. "Mr. Moretti would like a moment of your time." Every warning my parents had ever taught me echoed through my mind. Do not get into cars with strangers. Do not trust powerful men. Do not ignore your instincts. The problem was that my instincts were completely divided. Half of me wanted to run. The other half desperately wanted answers. I looked through the open door. Luca sat inside, calm as ever, watching me with those unreadable gray eyes. Then he spoke for the first time since the parking garage. "I owe you an explanation." My breath caught, because deep down, I had this strange feeling that whatever explanation came next was about to change everything. For a few seconds, I simply stood there staring at the open car door. The city moved around us. Traffic lights changed. People crossed intersections. A siren echoed somewhere in the distance. Yet it felt as though the entire world had narrowed to that single moment. Luca Moretti waited patiently inside the sedan. No pressure, no impatience, just quiet certainty. I looked around instead of moving. The hospital entrance stood less than 50 yards away. Nurses and doctors continued walking in and out beneath the bright lights. A uniformed security officer stood near the revolving doors. Cars passed steadily through the evening traffic. Nothing about the situation felt isolated. That mattered. It mattered a lot. The driver remained visible in the front seat, professional, calm. The rear door stayed open while Luca made no attempt to rush me. "You can say no," he said. His voice carried easily through the evening air. "Then why are you here?" I asked. "Because a conversation is easier face to face." I folded my arms. "Most people start with a phone call." A faint smile appeared. "Most people are not me." I hated how reasonable that sounded. More importantly, I hated that my curiosity was winning. "I am not getting into a stranger's car." The statement came out firmer than I expected. Luca nodded immediately. "Good." That answer caught me off guard. "Good, you should not." For a second, I simply stared at him. Then he glanced toward a small coffee shop directly across from the hospital. Its windows glowed warmly against the darkening street. Customers sat inside drinking coffee and working on laptops. Completely public, completely normal. "Would that make you more comfortable?" he asked. I followed his gaze. The coffee shop, bright lights, dozens of people, cameras, witnesses, safety. The suggestion immediately lowered my guard. Not because I trusted him, because he seemed to understand exactly why I did not. 10 minutes later, we sat across from each other at a small table near the front window. The driver remained outside. The evening crowd moved around us. Espresso machines hissed. Conversations blended into soft background noise. For the first time since receiving the mysterious text messages, I felt reasonably secure. Luca seemed completely at ease, as though discussing unusual situations in coffee shops was part of his daily routine. "You owe me several explanations," I said. To my surprise, he nodded. "That is fair. How do you know my name?" "I asked someone to identify you after the parking garage." My eyebrows rose. "That is supposed to make me feel better?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Probably not." I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. "Then start with the truth." Luca studied me for a moment. "The truth is that Ryan Keller has attracted attention for some time." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I prefer to know when certain people enter my world." I stared at him. "And I somehow ended up in your world?" His expression grew more serious. "You ended up near someone who concerned me." Silence settled between us. Outside, headlights swept across the wet street. "You sent those messages?" I asked. "Yes." "You realize most women would find that unsettling." "I do." And yet you sent them anyway, because I believed you should be careful. The frustrating part was that he sounded sincere, completely sincere. I looked away toward the city lights. You still have not explained why you care. For the first time since we sat down, Luca hesitated. The pause lasted only a second, but I noticed it. Because I do not enjoy watching decent people get pulled into situations they do not deserve. The answer felt polished, incomplete. That sounds like half the story. It is. I turned back toward him. And the other half? Luca's gray eyes met mine. The other half is something I am still trying to understand myself. The honesty in that answer caught me off guard. Powerful men were supposed to have every answer, every plan, every advantage. Yet for a brief moment Luca looked almost human, almost uncertain. The realization made him far more dangerous to my peace of mind than any intimidating reputation ever could. When we finally stood to leave, he handed me a simple white business card. Luca Moretti. Just a name and a phone number. Nothing else. If Ryan Keller ever contacts you again, he said quietly, call me. I looked down at the card resting in my hand. Somehow it felt heavier than paper should. Then I looked back up at him, standing beneath the warm lights of the coffee shop, surrounded by ordinary people. Luca seemed less like a mystery and more like the beginning of one. And for the first time since that disastrous date, I was not entirely sure which possibility frightened me more.